All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos, and I am joined by my friend, an Orthodox priest, Father Gabriel. How are you today, sir?
Good, and for the last time, Christ is risen.
Truly, he is risen. So today we have a bit of an interesting stream. We'll be talking about some of the recent drama and controversies regarding Orthodoxy, and some of you are going to be aware of the recent BBC article that just came out this past week, essentially designed as a hit piece against Father Moses McPherson down in Texas, a regular here on the YouTube channel, because of his demonstration or presentation and articulation of masculinity. And what was designed as a hit piece, ironically, when you read it, it sounds pretty appealing if you're a young man. So it didn't really do what it was intended to do. And of course, we've discussed before some of the stuff coming out of Fordham University, what we call the Fordhamites, and Sarah Riccardi-Schwartz's hit pieces on myself. I've been in two of them. So we're going to talk just kind of generally about what's going on. We're going to reflect on the BBC article. We're going to talk about Sister Vassa, being
former Sister Vassa,
now lay person. We're going to be talking about some of the controversies going on in Ukraine regarding the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and what appears to be a schismatic new church in Ukraine and its persecution of the true Orthodox Church and stuff like that. So that's kind of be the general gist of our conversation this morning. So thanks everybody for stopping in. And if you want to support, you have any questions or comments, or you have anything specific for Father Gabriel, feel free to send that in on Streamlabs, Dono Chat, or here on YouTube, whatever you prefer. And if you're feeling generous, please give some COTEL Crew memberships. So, Father Gabriel, to begin, I thought maybe before we get into the BBC article, we could talk a little bit about the phenomenon of Orthodoxy in America and generally the West right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think in our last conversation a few weeks ago, we discussed the growth of Orthodoxy. And there's been recent articles discussing how so many young men are finding sort of a refuge. And my thoughts, and it feels like what this BBC article was trying to do, although it wasn't very effective, is to tie some sort of abstract narrative between the Kremlin, Russia, the war in Ukraine, and all these young men becoming Orthodox. And Father Moses being a Russian Orthodox priest, you're a Russian Orthodox priest. And I was wanting you to comment first on the receptivity of Orthodoxy at really post-2020. And then do you have any concerns about these kind of subversive narratives that somehow the growth of Orthodoxy or people converting to Russian Orthodoxy is tied with some sort of Kremlin conspiracy or Putin involvement in American culture? Do you kind of see that narrative forming?
Oh, definitely. You know, they want to put us in, to quote our once famous presidential candidate, they want to put us in another basket of deplorables. They just want to put, just kind of lump us all into just, this rogues gallery here and just, fire us off into the sunset. But basically it's people, because there's TDS. Obviously people suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. I prefer to take a measured approach. I don't praise him unnecessarily, and I don't critique him unnecessarily. If he does something good, I'll acknowledge it, and if he does something bad, I'll call him out. That's what we're supposed to do. But just like we have Trump derangement syndrome, we have Putin derangement syndrome, and we also have Patriarch Kirill derangement syndrome.
Yes.
So it's like.
And I've noticed that within the Orthodox world is there's certain people you bring up Patriarch Kirill, and some people are really polarized on him.
Well, that's the thing. It's the people that get most offended are the ones who want a papal structure for our church, because that's the thing. The Orthodox, we don't have a pope,
right?
And Well, so actually, I'm going to just kind of veer off just for like 30 seconds for my own personal thing.
Sure.
When Patriarch Sergius, made his declaration with the state, or not with this, but saying, their joys are our joys, their sorrows are our sorrows. I mean, unfortunately, the godless government, just like in the time of the Roman emperors, that was the government de jure. And so, unless you hate your homeland, he's like, well, obviously, I guess, he doesn't have to support the Bolsheviks, but, their joys are our joys, and, that sort of thing, just so goes them, so goes the country.
Right.
So a lot of people, especially at the time in the church abroad, was like, oh my God, this is the sin of Judas, this is unforgivable. It's like, but it's like, I wasn't there. I was, neither were, the ones that stayed were brave enough to face martyrdom, face potential death. The thing is, like, I refuse to get my knickers in a knot because I'm not going to ascribe papal authority to him. If he was in error and he made, a mistake, well, that's on him. That doesn't mean the rest of the church is fallen. We're not Donatists. There are other bishops.
Exactly.
There are other bishops in the Russian church. I mean, 19 of them, and only 4 were not in prison. But at the same time, even though the modern Moscow Patriarchate came out from Patriarch Sergius's election under the Soviets, still it's like, okay, the people had a problem with Sergius. Well, he was only a patriarch for a little over a year. Then he reposed, and then got Patriarch Alexis I. So it's like, okay, problem solved. God took care of it, and there's a different patriarch. What his level of involvement is, God only knows. But again, this is whom was brought to the fore. So It's like we're not in that situation. But again, one bishop does not have papal authority. But yeah, these deranged people, they want to ascribe like papal authority to Patriarch Kirill. Oh, he's rooting Orthodoxy. It's like, well, it's actually the ones that are making that accusation that are telling on themselves, because they want to, consolidate under a certain other hierarch and, just lead us unilaterally into union with like the Catholics with no preconditions or any sort of reconciliation or commission or
Right. Well, and that's something that I have an article that we've covered in a previous stream called "The CIA's Man in Constantinople," which talks a little bit about the history between the Patriarchate of Constantinople and relationships with the CIA, maybe initially for good reasons during World War II, and later that becomes a much more intimate relationship through Bartholomew, which is continuing. So how much do you think, because there's been a lot of speculation, obviously Pope Francis reposed, so maybe we have a new Pope, Pope Leo, the American Pope, and there was this talk of a synod in 2025 between the Orthodox and the Roman Catholics.
Well, here's a funny observation. The Catholics have an American Pope, but how many Orthodox jurisdictions in America are headed by someone other than an American?
A lot of them.
Yeah, it's like, well, that's the thing. This is where even though we get lumped in with with this KGB agent nonsense, even though the KGB ceased to exist, the OCA, it's an all-American hierarchy. And ROCOR, our first hierarchs are no longer from the old country. Our late Metropolitan Hilarion was born in Canada, and our current Metropolitan Nicholas was born in New Jersey. Yeah, he's only let's see, he was born in 1974, so he's only like 7-8 years older than myself. So it's like, we're as American as apple pie, and so we're this connection to Russia. I mean, yeah, we're under the spiritual authority of the Russian Church, but it's not like we're receiving orders from Moscow. So it's like, yeah, we have an American hierarchy, and yeah, now we got an American Pope.
Right. But do you worry, or this narrative by some of the subversive forces? We've talked before about this rhetoric. Even Jordan Peterson's been a promotion of this concept of the woke right. And really, and I've been presenting this for really the last couple of weeks, what the woke right means, according to their own world steelmanning, what their presentation is that it's people that feel dispossessed of identity, ancestry, nationality, and therefore they're using critical theory in regards to the dominance of classical liberalism or modernity. And my point is that's ridiculous.
It's
And
funny
then,
because I would put Jordan Peterson with the woke right.
yeah, if that was the case,
Yeah.
really what I highlighted is that the woke right in this narrative is the sense of the establishment consensus of the post-enlightenment project feeling pressure by all the radical left progressive postmodernists that don't want to be a part of this, utopian narrative of modernity. And then you have all the people that are becoming Orthodox and trad Catholic who are really returning to a pre-modern worldview, a worldview that has a transcendent deity that you can engage with, that has meaning and value, that's really before the Enlightenment project. And my point, and what I presented in my dissertation work, is that this is really the phenomenon that's occurring. And so it's really the classical liberals, it's the centrists of the left and right that are so worried about the right and the left wings, because ultimately what's happening is they're critical of modernity and this idea that we can construct perfect societies without God.
Right, right.
So this woke right, then, I mean, obviously, as Orthodox, one of Peterson's and Lindsay's criticisms is that all these people on the woke right are critical of Israel. And I've had Father Turbo Qualls on, and he's made the point explicitly on this stream and other podcasts that you can't be an Orthodox Christian and be a Zionist, because we are.
I'll second that. I will absolutely second that. Yeah, you can't. You can't.
Yeah. And would you mind speaking on that? Because that's one of the accusations here. And I could see the criticism of Israel, our declaration of against ecumenism, against globalism, that this could be perceived or used as a way to construct a narrative around Orthodoxy, is that it's a bunch of anti-Semites and it's all these Russian infiltrators that are being propped up by criminals. I can already see this kind of going to be the narrative in the next 2 to 5 years moving forward. What are your thoughts?
Well, basically, like with this Trump derangement syndrome, Trump is splitting the Republican Party, or what was broadly considered the Republican coalition, and the younger generations, of course, they're not Israel first, they're America first,
right?
And part of what we're also living through, just like the economic catastrophe that's our modern day with inflation, all this other stuff, it's a failure of the previous generations, but also what the previous generations offered. Getting back to our other stream with under Ronald Reagan, where he went off the rails, was the moral majority,
right?
The utter failure of the moral majority, because what did they do? The bunch of evangelicals that are like, okay, we got to support Israel at all costs, and we got to, this is what Christianity really is. Catholics aren't really Christians. Orthodox, what are they? They might as well be Muslims. It's just
right.
It's it's just this utter, so that they wanted to be the shining city on the hill, and they turn it into a dumpster fire, and it's a rebellion against that. It's like, okay, we see your moral majority, you guys failed. Your worldview, your values, we don't share those. It's a lot, and I find a lot of people, that are criticizing like Father Moses and some of the up and comers on like yourself, it's like they're from the older generation. It's like you have wrong think. You're outside the Overton window of thought, of acceptable thought. It's like you're not supposed to question this, and it's like, well, no. I mean, when society is in the condition that it's in, I mean, if you're not questioning, just the very fundamentals, then it's like, what are you doing? So these young men that are finding orthodoxy, they're more thoughtful than their predecessors. It's like, because they had everything they wanted. They didn't think of anything. They just thought of themselves. And it's like, and that's another thing, that they still have main character syndrome. It's like, you guys as channels are reaching audiences that they can't, it's like they've, as the Simpsons said, they become the old men yelling at the clouds, or, old man yells at sky or whatever. It's like, yeah, that they've lost their influence, and they can't stand that there's a competing worldview that, gets back to basics, that acknowledges that there is a God, that we're created for a greater purpose than just materialism, commerce, enriching the rich. It's, we're here to leave a legacy, whether it's, spiritual, whether it's, progeny, whether it's, I don't know, building, building a huge monument or something, right. Just like whether it's a church something or a city hall or just, something, making your mark on society.
Right. Yeah. That's what we were talking about last time with masculinity and how Orthodoxy, affords people that. And what you were just talking about with some of the attacks, and we were mentioning this backstage before we went live, but this was a hit piece that Sarah Riccardi-Schwartz wrote last year or 2 years ago, July 2023. It's really an attack on Father Peter Heers, but because I had done a stream with him,
it's guilt by association.
Yeah, she derides me as a PhD student at the GTU who's made a career out of streaming about a variety of religious and conspiracy theory ideas, and his content is openly homophobic, transphobic, fatphobic, and ableist. And my thought, and the reason I bring that up, is related to the conversation that we just had. It's like these people, the Fortamites or Sarah Riccardi-Schwartz, this gatekeeping within Orthodoxy. It's like they're not wanting people to return to a true Orthodox fronema. And instead, they want it to shape within the contours of modernity. So you can be Orthodox, but you can't be against fat, obesity. You can't be against trans people. You can't be against, homosexuality. But you can be Orthodox. I mean, Orthodoxy is great, right? So it's like you can be Orthodox as long as it fits within modernist presuppositions of what a good and virtuous person is, which is totally contrary to the historical teachings of the church.
Right. Well, here's a dirty secret. You could be Orthodox and homosexual. You just can't act on it.
That's true.
Because what they like to leave out is the part where our Savior says, "Go and sin no more."
Right.
They say, right. It's like, come as you are. We're not going to judge you. Basically, turn the Orthodox Church into what Pope Francis like. Oh, who am I to judge? Live your life. We'll bless anything that just anything that comes along, and just do your best. Don't do anything ascetical. Don't reform your life. Come as you are. It's like, no. I mean, and that's the change that the young men are seeking. Is the Fortamites? They're offering Protestantism,
right.
and behaviorism,
right.
because that's what you do when you go to the Protestant church. As I said in the last stream, you got all these activities, school, sports, all this other stuff. It's like, it's just modifying behavior. Well, now you're a part of that church, so that's what you do, but you're not being healed of any passions, or you're not growing any closer to your wife or your children. Your life isn't being transformed. Same thing with this thing here. It's like, it's all an academic exercise.
Yes.
God can't, you can't grasp God intellectually, but I guess, they want to, circumscribe them as best they can, and just put them in the box, and this is just one part of our lives, because
and that's where, like, some of the scholarship, I read something out of Fordham, I forget the author of the article, but it basically was presenting an openness to multiplicity of genders, claiming that Christ is kind of not validating his full humanity. I mean, he still took on full humanity, but he's kind of the mixture of both male and female. And this was some type of contemporary scholarship coming out of Fordham. I mean, this is, and you can see this repackaging of Orthodoxy to fit modern sensibilities regarding troons and sex transitions and all this stuff. So it's entirely subversive. And it's just funny, to your point about the main character syndrome, is the attempt to modify Orthodoxy to be more like Protestantism or liberal Catholicism. Yeah. It doesn't get traction. Like, they don't. That's not why people want to become Orthodox.
Exactly. Yeah. Their ascesis is using the right pronouns. That's what, and their ascetical practices are scouring the internet. It's not standing in your icon corner and saying your morning and evening prayers and doing the Jesus prayer, doing the prostrations. That's not their church. Their church is using the correct pronouns and monitoring everyone else's thoughts. And another telltale sign is what I've noticed on comments online is like, oh, this is who I am at church is not who I am during the week. And it's like, that's exactly the opposite of Orthodox Christianity. It's like, who you are at church is supposed to be who you are throughout the week. Your values at church inform, or at least supposed to inform, how you are outside of the church,
right?
And the church building, that is. But
So
Yeah.
let's move our conversation to the BBC article that we were.
Before we do, one little thing,
Go ahead.
because I was rewatching your a couple streams that I missed, and I love the thing about pilgrimage, and that's another thing I want to talk about. It's at some point in the future with you, but you had mentioned the Eva Run icon.
Yes.
So for those in our area, the Indianapolis area, the icon was just the St. Tikhon's for the annual Memorial Day pilgrimage. So this Friday, it'll be at St. George Russian Orthodox Church in Cincinnati.
Oh, okay.
At 6:30 p.m. on Friday evening. And then on Saturday evening, it's going to St. Michael's Antiochian Church in Louisville. And that's where it's going to be Sunday morning and early afternoon before it goes back to Hawaii.
Oh, wow.
So if you're in the kind of near Midwest here and around, Kentucky, Appalachia, just there's a chance you could see Our Lady's icon before she goes back to Hawaii. So just want to mention that in case anyone's in the area and available. So right. Saturday night or Friday night in Cincinnati, and then Saturday night and Sunday morning in Louisville.
Cool.
Yeah.
You already got a chance to read this article, correct?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I got to talk to the man himself. Yeah, I called Father Moses on Monday. It was good to catch up with my seminary classmate. They're like, "Hey, you're internet famous, Abuna." So
what were your thoughts? Because this basically, we're gonna kind of move through the article and quote some stuff. Before we do, just kind of what your general thoughts are. The tone and tenor of this article is basically equating Father Moses's presentation and his YouTube videos online and promotion of masculinity as you can see here, absurd levels of manliness, and tying the sort of his Rocor parish, but in a sense, Rocor generally speaking, with like this ultra right-wing masculinity, and it doesn't come out as explicitly a hit piece, but every time it says something, it'll have like a contrary paragraph underneath that kind of criticizes. And one of the things was saying that this return to tradition and like conservative Christianity is part of American Puritanism that's making its head in Orthodoxy. But what was your kind of thoughts about this article and attacking Orthodoxy based on the idea that it allows and promotes like traditional masculinity?
Well, so I agree with Father Moses that the article is meant to make him and others look bad, and I think it casts, it made us look good.
Right. That's the funny part is if you were an 18-year-old male,
she did such a poor job. Because I asked, is like, did you actually sit down with this woman? And he actually sat down for 2 hours.
2 hours. Wow.
He sat down with her for 2 hours, and the fact that there's not one direct quote means that people want to like. Online I read somebody come and say, "What the heck is wrong with our priests? Aren't they stupid?" And blah blah blah. It's like, if you actually look at the article, there's no direct quotes. She basically went fishing online to his videos, and it's like, okay, well, some of the culture warriors, like Father John Whiteford, Father Peter Heers, and Father Josiah Trentham, they take themselves very seriously. Yeah. Oh, that's well and good. Okay, Father Moses, well, he takes the faith seriously, but he doesn't take himself seriously.
Right.
And as I've commented online, it's like anybody born after 1985 knows that just like you don't. You take Trump seriously, but not literally. Same thing with Father Moses. You don't take him literally in everything, absurd levels of manliness. And then, you don't eat soup. Like, come on. I mean, how the Orthodox monasteries would fall in on themselves if they couldn't eat soup. So it's just absurd. But absurd levels of manliness. But she took, hyperbole and said that's an actual, quote. There's a realistic quote, and it's like, well, no, it's for entertainment value, and it's right. Again, it's a generational thing. It's like they don't realize that they're not the intended audience, and that they're just completely missing his message. Because he's mixing humor with actual instruction. So this also goes to show you can't please anybody. If you're super serious, you're gonna get raked over the coals, and if you're humorous, you're gonna get raked over the coals. So there's no pleasing everybody.
Right. No, and what you're referring to is right here. There's a line: skinny jeans, crossing your legs, using an iron, shaping your eyebrows, and even eating soup are among the things he derides as too feminine.
Absolutely, yeah. But again, that's from his video. That's not. It never came up in his in the interview. So
Right.
it's funny how they just see that's how desperate they are. It's like the whole Russiagate narrative. That's why they couldn't use anything like that against Trump this time, because it has already been like thoroughly debunked. It was just like, if anything, there was like Ukrainian and Israeli interference. There was no like Russian interference, or at least not enough to get Trump elected. Same here. It's like there's no there. It's they're grasping for straws and connecting things that aren't connected.
Right. Yeah, and here's one of the things that of notable concern here is she says almost all the converts I meet have opted to homeschool their offspring, partly because they believe women should prioritize their families rather than their careers. Father John Whiteford, an archpriest in the Row Corps from Spring North of Houston, says homeschooling ensures a religious education and is, quote, a way of protecting your children, unquote, while avoiding any talk about, quote, transgenderism or the 57 genders of the month or whatever.
Yeah, again, that's the only quote from Father John. That's it. That's the only thing.
It's a great quote, though.
It is.
Transgenderism or the 57 genders of the month or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, it's.
And so then the article, there was one notable. So it talks a little bit about the growth of Orthodoxy, kind of tries to put it in context. The increase in the number of converts is hard to quantify, but data from the Pew Research Center suggests Orthodox Christians are 64% male, up 46% from 2007. I saw that Father Josiah Trenum, too, put out a video kind of curtailing some of the extreme optimism about growth, Orthodox growth in the United States, because there was a meme going around that it was maybe somewhere between 600,000, 700,000 to 6 to 7 million. He doesn't think that it's grown that much.
No, I mean, maybe one day as things get more off the rails, but yeah, not. I mean, but I think there's at least enough of a notable trend, plus enough visible people. I mean, heck, we just got big upped on Andrew Schultz's podcast.
Right. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, Wes Huff didn't have much of a response for that, did he?
Yeah, it was just. Yeah.
Well, nobody has the historic faith, and my Baptist theology it's closest.
Yeah, so that, and then one guy getting destroyed by that Coptic Christian at, where was that, at Harvard or somewhere else?
Yeah.
It was just, yeah. So I mean, it's breaking the surface, but even that's too much,
But one of the things that I didn't hear Father Josiah say in that video that I think is a good caveat regarding curtailing optimism. However, according to the Pew Research Center, I showed this in a stream. It was looking at the median age of attendee during a worship service. The only traditions in the United States that were in the 30s was Eastern Orthodoxy, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism. So only those four traditions are actually like replacing itself with young people. And Protestantism on average was like 68 years old. So in a generation,
they're dead. They're dead and they don't know it.
Yeah, I mean, in a generation, what is going to happen to Protestantism? It's going. I mean, once the boomers are gone, that's the majority of their parishes.
Yeah, because shoot, I should have looked this up. But the gentleman who gave us our presentation at our clergy retreat in Chicago, yeah, he said the church that he grew up in, where he and his family helped build stuff. It's like, yeah, like the wood that they installed in the church when they renovated it, it's still there. He could see it, and they made a visible mark on it. But now that church basically went woke, has a woman pastor, has it's all 50 shades of transgenderism, and all this stuff. And what was once thriving traditional church is now empty. But the thing is, because so many people had passed on before and left endowments to the church, it's got money to kingdom come, but it'll just be an empty church. There'll be nobody in it because they're not proclaiming the truth of Christianity, let alone like the truth of natural law. It's what's even in accordance with nature, but let alone the divine law. But yeah, it's yeah, a lot of these buildings are just legacy buildings that have like huge endowments, but like no congregation.
Right. No congregation. And from what I've been told, again, I haven't gone to a Protestant church in years, but people that have been even attending St. Mary's of Egypt, Father Gabriel's been there multiple times, that they're saying that even like the community feel in some of these Protestant churches is falling. Like it doesn't have the same community that at least it used to offer. So it was still Protestant. It still had what as Orthodox we'd consider many heresies and shortcomings. However, they tend to have really strong communities, but now that's falling apart, and politics and social issues are really dividing almost every Protestant church right now.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you have no theology, I guess, politics becomes your theology. And then plus, when there's no transformation going on and your kids are involved in other activities like sports and they start scheduling sports on Sunday mornings, it's like, well, I could go and cheer my kid on, or I could go to sit in this, weird service and, not get any benefit out of it. And, they'll ask me to pay more for that service than they will for my kid's soccer league. So let's just do the soccer league.
I want to share this quote. This was one that got a lot of play, but before I do, I just want to catch up. John gifted a COTEL Crew membership. Thank you so much, John, for that. Really appreciate it. And then John throws in $5, says, Father bless.
Oh, Lord's blessing.
Thank you very much, John, for the support. And then Bill Hicks, back from the dead, throws in $5 Australian. Thank you so much, Bill Hicks. God bless you. And then Jimmy Cambridge throws in 10, says, hate to be that guy, but after reading the article, that which, if anything, showed nothing but reasons to join the Orthodox Church, exactly, I found out that the writer, Lucy Ash, she's the author of the BBC hit piece, is married to a Jewish individual. Interesting.
Go figure.
An interesting connection there, Jimmy. Thank you very much for that, brother, and thanks for the support. Can't say I'm totally surprised, but this quote right here got a lot of play from people online, and so Father Moses tells his congregation there are two ways of serving God: being a monk or a nun, or getting married. Those who take the second path should avoid contraception and have as many children as possible. Okay, pretty reasonable statement. Show me one saint, quote, show me one saint in the history of the church who ever blessed any kind of birth control, Father Moses says. As for masturbation, or what the church calls self-abuse, the priest condemns it as pathetic and unmanly. True.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's a quote. Yeah, there's a quote. But yeah, where's he wrong? Where's he wrong?
He's not wrong. He's not wrong. And then it follows, Father Moses says orthodoxy is not masculine, it's just normal. While in the West, everything has become feminized, some Protestant churches, he believes, mainly cater for women. Quote, I don't want to go to services that feel like a Taylor Swift concert. Father Moses says, if you look at the language of the worship music, it's all emotion. That's not men. Right. And then they get a quote from Eliza Davis, a former Protestant who now belongs to the Greek Orthodox Church in Austin. Okay. Is a Sunday school teacher and has her own podcast. She says many converts belong to the, quote, anti-woke crowd and sometimes have strange ideas about their new faith, especially those in the Russian church. Oh, okay. So they got a liberal-leaning Protestant convert in the Greek church to condemn those converting to the Russian church. She says they see it as a military, rigid, disciplinary, masculine, authoritarian religion, Elisa says. It's kind of funny. It's almost as if the old American Puritans and their craziness is resurfacing.
Oh yeah. We're just because we stand on separate sides, men and women, and cover their heads. Women cover their heads. Oh yeah, now it's a Handmaid's Tale. Yep.
Right.
She got us.
I mean, so I love that, and that's what we use for kind of the quote for the thumbnail.
But
go ahead.
Somehow she doesn't get blasted for being a Sunday school teacher. Would that be considered private school?
Oh yeah, good point.
I wonder what
she's one of the good ones because
what's she teaching in the Sunday school? How to like coloring pictures? I don't know who she is, but I've seen her name, but I
Alexandria of all unions icon. She says, Lord have mercy, the pro-LGBT ancient faith author, Alyssa. So sounds like she's already known for being very liberal. I'd never heard of this woman, Alyssa Davis.
Okay. Well, I mean, I won't go so far as to condemn ancient faith because a lot of people do. I mean, they're a big tent. They have a lot of content creators on there, and a lot of them that I respect. Like, not the least of which is Father Tom Soroka. So, I sometimes I wish the tent was a little smaller, but that's not my not my circus, not my monkeys. Again, we're given a brain for discernment, and again, that's what these people are bemoaning is the fact that people use their brain for discernment. They're like, oh, I want a more ascetic church. Well, here's another thing. Some people like this is like, especially with Father Peter here's raising awareness. Sometimes I think, well, I won't say he, but some people that hear his message and kind of go off the rails, as far as like, baptism goes, because I've never, I mean, at least in the content that I've seen of his, he's never said anything heretical, but a lot of people are like real big on rebaptism. I'm like, just leave it to the bishops to decide that. But at the same time, if you have a choice of jurisdictions when you're going in, and one jurisdiction explicitly says, we're not going to baptize you, we're just going to chrismate you, and people are like, I want to be baptized.
Right.
Too bad. Well, there you go. Well, they're going to kick over to the Russian church because they realize that baptism actually means something in Orthodoxy. It's
right.
not.
Well, if you go to a monastery, even the Greek St. Anthony's, if you're not baptized Orthodox, they'll rebaptize you right there in a trash can because that's essential.
Yeah.
And I've been told the same thing's true on Mount Athos, that they won't let you in the monasteries unless you've been baptized Orthodox. So with that perspective, it is, I agree with you in regards to we let the bishops handle it. Mm-hmm. God's judgment isn't on me for what my priest and the bishop decides. And the economia within the church, it's not like I'm going to be missing anything. However, that is the historical practice of the church, and we believe it's a sacrament. And so we don't believe that the Catholic Eucharist is a sacrament, but somehow we believe their baptism is. I mean, that makes no sense. It defies logical categories.
Yeah.
Siege D throws in 5. Thank you so much, Siege. He says, hey, DPH, random question. Do you military/overhead press in the gym? If so, what's your PR? I do once in a while. I don't PR it, and I tend to do military presses behind the head. I found that it hits the delts a little bit better, at least for me. But I pretty much rep them out 8 to 12 reps, throw like a 45 on each side. So it's not a ton of weight, but I don't PR military press, no. But I know you're a tank, so you probably do. But thank you very much, brother, for the $5. I do appreciate that. God bless you. So we see then they got Buck Johnson. So shout out to Buck. They got this Chad photo of him. Former atheist Buck began exploring Russian Orthodoxy during the COVID pandemic, which is, again, as we already highlighted, and I believe it was the OCA, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't the OCA that did the demographic work on converts that came up with a study that said 75% of all converts were men between the ages of 45 and 18?
I think it was under the Assembly of Bishops.
Oh, okay.
I think, I can't remember, but I know also Matthew Namey's been amalgamating like data like that in Orthodox history as well. Trying to, because a lot of these earlier studies, they're like, oh, people are converting to Christianity or something like that, and it's the ones that are like, oh, people are leaving the church. Well, that's Protestantism, because our churches are slowly getting filled.
Right. Well, and this was, it actually kind of connects with a super chat that just came in from No Face Killa. He says that 2025 appears to be the year where the knives come out against the Eastern Orthodox, and it's coming from those who call themselves Christians. And
well, see that it's always been that case. But it's like the Ukrainian, the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel-Palestinian war. it's finally bringing it to the front. It's like, hey, there are actually Orthodox Christians in these countries, like you know, because I mean, where was that? Was I in seminary? I don't know. It was years ago. This video was being passed around about some, Protestant, missionary going to somewhere in Ukraine and asking if like these, old babushkas have been saved, and one of them was just like beating them with their like purse, like, get out of here. It's like, of course we're Christians before you guys were. Get out of here,
right?
So I can't remember how old that video was, but it's like, yeah, they don't view. It's just that people are now coming to the realization that the old moral majority doesn't view Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy as Christians, and it's like, no, we're the only ones that can actually trace back to the first.
Yeah, we're the only ones that can historically call ourselves Christians, and that connects with I don't know if you heard the Protestant pastor. He kind of has a somewhat influential Twitter following or X following. I mean, I wouldn't say it's super influential, but his name's Joel Webbin, and he's down in Texas.
I've heard the name.
I think he's Baptist. And I did a stream covering a stream that he did, basically condemning Orthodoxy. So the whole thing was about why men are converting to Orthodoxy, young men, and the Protestants are having trouble. And his whole thing is he's an overtly a Christian Protestant nationalist. So he, I don't have, again, they're the details of what Christian nationalism is, especially from an Orthodox perspective. That needs to be discussed. But in regards to associating national identity with Christianity, obviously I don't have a problem with that. We're Orthodox. That's what the Greek Orthodox, that's what the Russian Orthodox Church is. However, his whole thing was going on. It turns out I talked with Father Moses, and Joel Webbin had actually run into Father Moses. Apparently they're around the same area in Austin. Apparently a handful of young men that went to Joel Webbin's Protestant parish had converted to Orthodoxy and joined Father Moses. And so Webbin in the video claims that Orthodoxy, we believe in magic. We're very much similar to paganism. We have all these different things, but it says, well, they do have great aesthetics. And I can't help it,
we believe in magic. Who are the ones with the smoke machines?
Yeah, exactly. Reverend David Copperfield on stage.
Exactly.
And he's like, they do have great aesthetics, and they do have like masculine priests, and he never said Father Moses, but he's like, yeah, you have these priests, these Orthodox priests, and they're like bench pressing online. I can see why superficially young men want to become Orthodox, but it's not because the theology or it's true. And it's okay, guy. So
no, it's because it's true, and it's but it's just Protestant theology is so bankrupt. What's it offering? I mean, you just say the sinner's prayer and that's it. You can't go wrong. You're assured of salvation. So okay, what's the next steps? No, just join the program and tithe. That's it.
Yeah, just tithe, and if you can play a few riffs, why don't you pick up the electric guitar for the jam band?
Exactly, for the jam. And have a couple kids so they can be in the Christmas pageant, and exactly, and have nothing to do with.
Josiah Elleron throws in 10. Thank you very much. He says Orthodox get it from atheists, Catholics, Protestants, etc. And it all sounds to me like the church founded by Christ is right where it needs to be. Exactly. And to the comment here, I mean, the persecution and the animosity towards Orthodoxy and its rise is puts really the church in its historical position, which is a place of persecution. I mean,
yeah. In fact, we should reclaim the proper title from that failed Al Gore film, "An Inconvenient Truth." That's Orthodoxy, an inconvenient truth. It breaks these narratives, because that's another thing. Because a lot, as I said earlier, a lot of these Protestants are wrapped up in politics, and I'm always hesitant about nationalism, like patriotism. That's because at least the Russian church makes a distinction between like patriotism, where you love your country and you serve your country, and that. But nationalism, that's where like Israel, they're ethnically superior to the people that they're slaughtering, and the people they're slaughtering are subhumans. And so it's kind of like a rehashing of the neocon agenda that we need to go, the white man's burden. We need to go colonize or recolonize places of the world. We need to be the world's policemen. We need to forget what we're doing here, forget that our nation is falling apart, but we need to go and get involved in foreign conflicts, overthrowing foreign governments, all this other stuff. It's a mess.
Right. And when you're talking about the conflation of politics, I remember I was going back and forth with evangelical Christian, nice guy, wasn't, mean-spirited or anything, just misguided. And I brought up the point that you mentioned earlier about, do you realize that 10% of the Palestinians are Orthodox Christians? And I mentioned the bombing of I'm having a brain fart here on the really old parish there.
St. Porphyrius.
Yes, that got bombed by Israel. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. And I told him that, and he was totally unaware that 10% of Palestine were Christians, was totally unaware of the, and he was a devout Zionist. And then his reason, once being confronted with that fact, is he's like, well, I didn't know that, but it's why do they keep voting for Hamas? I mean, it's their fault. I mean, they're supporting terror. And
keep voting for Hamas. Hamas was like early 2000s. It was like right after 9/11 that they were voted in. Israel has not allowed elections since then.
Yeah, but don't even get into the IDF connections with Hamas. Netanyahu, I mean, just 10 years ago, they said that they were funding Hamas.
Right.
So the whole thing, but my only point of bringing that up is to just show some of the reasoning and the rationale of like evangelical or Protestant Christians in America, because you're absolutely right, is that the absence of dimensions of their theology is filled in with politics.
Actually, you know what? Speaking of that, yeah, because Pastor John Hagee, he's one of the worst charlatans.
Yes.
Like, I mean, he like literally clothes himself in the Zionist flag. I mean, he like, and yeah, they have nothing, no Easter rituals, no nothing. And so like, oh, we're going to have a Passover Seder. It's like, what is that? Is there anything more pathetic than Protestant Christians having a Passover Seder rather than, doing what we Orthodox? Oh, and that's another thing. Oh, we're people of the book, we're biblical. Blah, 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 blah. No, they're not. Did they take one verse of scripture and exegete it incorrectly for 45 minutes? I mean, what? I mean, our 3-day Paschal service, it's 3 days. It begins with the Passion of our Lord. Matins with the 12 Gospels. The first Gospel reading is at least a half hour long, 20, 30 minutes long, because it's John chapter 14 through 17. It's 3 chapters of the, and we go through the Passion in real time. Then, we have Royal Hours that recapitulates that. And then we have the unnailing at Vespers, and then Matins the following evening, with Friday evening with, the Lamentations and all the theology of Christ, just in the tomb. He's already harrowed Hades, but he's not risen yet. And, the murmurers are lamenting, and everyone, the apostles are scattered, and they just, and then finally Holy Saturday, everything builds up. But what do we have at Holy Saturday Vesper Liturgy? 15 Old Testament readings. It's like, how much, I mean, there is just so much scripture in our services. It's just like,
right.
There's nothing else. It's like we get accused of like not being biblical or scriptural. It's like, what do our services consist of during the last 3 days of Holy Week? Scripture,
Yeah.
And you go through that, and it changes you, because you're forced to put yourself, it's just the priest reading the gospel or the reader reading the Old Testament lecture, and you just put yourself there. It's like, what all the Old Testament types, including the original Passover, that's in there, and you just contemplate all that, how that all ties together with, Christ's resurrection. And it's, and then finally when you're at Saturday night and everything just explodes into this, joyous celebration, it's like, you've been crucified with Christ. You've done something ascetical, but it's just like you've just recapitulated salvation history.
Right.
You've gone through all that, and it's there's no going back to anything else. There's no Protestant hymn. There's no anything else that can take the place of that experience.
Well, and it's sacramental. And I was going to make the point regarding the Zionism and how the politics sort of infiltrate Protestant theology and fulfill lost dimensions based on their own structure, is they don't have sacraments. So there is no sort of material reality in which you engage with God for the Protestants. And in that replacement, it's like Zionism and like the materiality of politics becomes the sort of sacramental mystical dimension for Protestants.
Exactly. Yeah, Israel becomes their sacrament.
Right.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Supporting Israel becomes their sacrament. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it.
Shout out to AC, one of our good Orthodox brothers. He says that applies to converts like Apostate Prophet, or I think that's his name. He's a Zionist. And then Robert Spencer at Jihad Watch and their Protestant / neocon following and a route to dual covenant like Vatican II.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how there's an attempt by some, like I believe it's Apostate Prophet is his name. It may be different than I think it's Apostate Prophet.
Oh,
anyway,
is he the one who debated Andrew Wilson?
Yes, and for Zionism, in favor of Zionism. Yes, so I believe his name's Apostate Prophet. But yeah,
Orthodoxy. But if I was doing his catechism, that's something he has to get.
Exactly. Well, he's a catechumen and he's doing a public debate on. I mean, obviously it's a political. He's talking about Zionism, but he's informing it through his newly found Orthodox lens. And I mean, you cannot reconcile political Zionism with the ecclesiology of Orthodoxy because we are Israel.
And actually, kudos to the new Pope. He's speaking out on behalf of the Palestinians. And, you know, somewhere on my phone, I saved a bunch of screenshots I found online of previous popes going back to like Leo the 13th and subsequently, you know, were saying, you know, Catholic doctrine, even Catholic doctrine is incompatible with Zionism.
Right. Yeah, that was one of the few things that I appreciated upon the death of Pope Francis is it came out that he was calling one of the Catholic parishes there in Gaza every night to make sure that they were still there. Again, not a fan of the Catholic Church, the Vatican, nor Pope Francis, but
we wish he would taken care of the rest of his flock like he did there. But you know, at least he did something.
Yeah,
good.
Exactly. But do appreciate, and it seems like this is one of the things that, and this is why I think that the attacks on Orthodoxy as being tied with the Kremlin in some way are going to ramp up. And I suspect that it could be through NGOs that are tied with Zionism and Israel, because without Zionist support in America, I mean, Israel is kind of doomed. And so they're very much dependent upon Protestant evangelical support for them through that dispensationalist theological lens.
Yeah, even the perennial fence sitter Tim Pool saw that, and he told, and whatever that Chatham House rules meeting was with Netanyahu, he told him, it's like, yeah, 20 years you're going to lose support.
Right, and so, in that process, I could see the NGOs and even the MAGA conservative movement, especially with, you know, one of the concerning things for me as an Orthodox Christian regarding the Trump administration is this push on anti-Semitism. And really, I'm not been big favor of the university. So the fact they're pulling, you know, money from Columbia and Harvard and forcing them to use their own endowment, I really don't care about that. I think education would be better if the federal government wasn't in university subsidizing. However,
well, they say play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Exactly. However, the reason for pulling their funds is because they're allowing protests that are in favor of Palestine by, yes, radical leftist progressives that probably know nothing about the history or the context of the situation. It's all just sort of political fervor. Totally get that. But this push for anti-Semitism, I mean, this is concerning for me because if we continue to maintain that we are Israel, I could easily see this being labeled in the coming years as some type of pro-Russian propaganda of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I mean, and never mind, it was the Soviet Union who first recognized the state of Israel. That was, but yeah, I mean, oh, I don't even want to think about how bad free speech will be then if we lose this.
Right,
yeah, and that's the thing. You know, RFK gets appointed to clean house HHS, and he's fighting the anti-Semitism. It's like,
the first two public posts by him as HHS is on anti-Semitic rhetoric.
Yeah, that's really making America unhealthy. Anti-Semitism. That's Zionism. That's what's making America unhealthy. You know.
Well, and the irony is, obviously. There's an article that came out, I think it was last month, that was documenting that millennial and Gen Z support for Israel is at an all-time low. And even including the boomer generation, which there's a massive difference between the boomers and the millennial and Gen Zers on the question of Israel, even including the whole U.S. demographic, it was the lowest that's ever been recorded since they've been measuring it. And I think that is one of the reasons why the Adelson money, and I look at, and I've said this before, but the MAGA movement I see as an oligarchical agreement between the Zionist powers that be, the MAGA movement, the Trumps, and then the technocrats with the Silicon Valley money. And so all of them are sort of aligned themselves together. And I could see a point in which just traditional Orthodox Christianity was going to be smeared as being tied with, foreign propaganda and then being anti-Semitic. Yeah. And the fact that the Trump administration is, deporting people with green cards because of things they say about Israel. I mean, that's
crazy. Well, and that's the thing, because MAGA went from Make America Great Again to, as Max Blumenthal said, Miriam Adelson's goals achieved.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what it feels like. That's what it feels like. Bitter Klinger throws in 5, says, do you think Dyer and Wilson appearing on more mainstream platforms is shining more light on orthodoxy, hence the knives out? I think it certainly helps.
Well, it's providing a different worldview. It's just like a different frame of reference. It's just like, oh, this is an option. And
right, exactly. It's demonstrating that you can be like the most traditional Christian and stand toe-to-toe with any of the modern ideologies. In fact, it's superior. I think just for a lot of people, especially uninformed and uneducated, just assume that the modern secular atheist or whatever is going to be a difficult debate partner. And it's like, no, not really, actually. And I think so Dyer and Andrew and what they're doing is demonstrating actually what you perceive as intellectual rigor or strong arguments are really, really faulty. And that allows space for, as Christos Yanaros in his postmodern metaphysics says, that the postmodern turn is an opportunity for Western people to do away with modernity and return back to pre-modernity, which is orthodoxy, which is, he argues, is a superior option to postmodernism. And so the postmodern turn is something to be embraced, because the things that have been prevented, the guardrails of modernity are dissolving. And it's allowing people to just exit the system. And I think that's what the young men, that's why they're becoming Orthodox, whether it's conscious or not. I don't think they're thinking in terms of paradigms and intellectual history, but it's a way out of rationalism, scientism, technocratic utopia, and then these democracies. This idea that all this is going to lead to utopia. Now, it's not going to happen. It's failed.
And actually, one thing I just random thought that popped into my head, though. There's one issue that the Orthodox, or at least Christians, can work with on atheists. And because one thing about the overturning of Roe v. Wade is some of these moral majority pinheads seem hell-bent, like Ron DeSantis. It's like he wants to go so extreme with abortion laws. I mean, I would love to see abortion eliminated. But the fact is, 70% of Americans want to see abortion in some form. However, the real secular humanists, they want to limit abortion to at least, if the baby can feel pain, no abortion.
Right.
So at least in the states that have extreme abortion laws up to the 9th month, at least we could work with like the secular humanists, or at least we should, to at least limit abortion to like the first couple months. And then from there, you change people's hearts. But just, legislating, absolutely no exemptions whatsoever. It's like they're just tempting fate to just get these laws overturned. And, they're missing the forest through the trees, because my interest is in, like, as a pro-lifer, is to actually save life and preserve life. Whereas it's just like they're just going to go so extreme, and it's they're going to win the battle but lose the war. With how they present their arguments, it's just like no exceptions. And because they're also the ones that, stand on street corners with like, chopped up fetuses. Like you're not winning anybody with that argument. I mean, yeah, abortion is horrible, and that's the reality of abortion. But you win people over by changing their heart, but not by browbeating them. But it's this whole tactic, like just of censorship, or just like browbeating people into what they believe that the right opinion should be.
Right.
So.
Right. Jim Bob makes a great point here. A shout out to Made by Jim Bob. Looking forward to spending time with you and the wife, Jim Bob, this weekend. God bless you, brother. Safe travels to Milwaukee. He says, I think we will see a spike in co-opting the term Orthodox to dilute it culturally. And I could see that happening.
Interesting.
I've already seen some Protestants refer to themselves as Orthodox.
There you go. Case in point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although the funny thing is, we at least we no longer get mistaken for Orthodox Jews. So that's
true.
That's huge. That's huge.
Step in the right direction.
Yeah.
One battle won. The war is still raging. AC throws in 10, says, any thoughts on the stumbling block and whataboutism the MP created by stating Muslims worship the same God and celebration, Quran kissing? This is what prot Zionist, neocon, and ecumenists go to now. Okay, so what AC is talking about in regards to Orthodox apologetics is some of our enemies claim that the Moscow Patriarchate, again, remember Russia had their military commercial that identified like Russian Muslims, Russian Catholics, and Russian Orthodox as all fighting for the same. I can understand that from a nationalist perspective, but him stating that Muslims worship the same God and kissing the Quran is worrisome. Do you have thoughts on that?
Oh, I didn't see that one. I'm willing to, if he's got a link, I definitely want to see.
Yeah, does anybody have a link?
But at the same time, I mean, of course, the official the state religion of Russia is Orthodoxy, but there are some Catholics there, and then the other legal religions are Islam, Judaism, and Buddhism. So anytime there's like an official ceremony, obviously Patriarch Kirill will have like the place of honor, but there will be like in a Muslim imam or mufti or whatever, and a Jewish rabbi and some sort of Buddhist there as well.
Okay, so I found
the Russian Federation is huge, and so it's
right. That's where because I played that during a stream, the commercial that they ran of the different types of Russians all fighting for Russia, and I said I could understand that from a nationalist perspective, although it didn't make me feel great as an Orthodox Christian. However, I just put in what AC said, and this article came up. So I'm not supporting the source here. I know no idea what Fitzpatrick Informer is. It says exposing Judeo-Masonic Bolshevist conspiracies. This from 2019. Russian Orthodox. Again, KGB. That's already a very loaded title there.
Oh, the 2019? Well, that's even before the war. Hold on. What's this? Oh, and here's another thing. Yeah, Gennady Zyuganov. He's the head of the KPRF.
Let me see if I can find another article.
So so just to show how much the world has changed, the KPRF, the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, ever since the fall of communism, they removed the atheist plank, the anti-religion plank from their party. And in fact, Gennady Zyuganov is a devout Orthodox Christian, and he begins his May Day address to the party. Tovarishchi, comrades, Christos Voskresya. So you go from like militant atheism of Lenin and all that, and then now the head of the KPRF is saying Christ is risen. So,
Father, I want to finish this article real quick, but
sure.
Bringing up a question, I'm curious what your thoughts are, and that is, how do you feel about the work of Alexander Dugin? So I follow some of his stuff. I haven't read his books.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar. Although one thing, I'm a friend of mine, Caleb Maupin, has read some of his stuff, and his classification of empires as being either like sea based or land based. I find that quite interesting, because the land based empires tend to like build bridges and whereas sea-based ones like the British Empire, they just kind of go and just like destroy everything and colonize, and they don't really build bridges. They just go to enslave and take, and whereas China trying to get the Belt and Road Initiative going, Yeah, they're trying to do what's in China's best interest, but they're also at least giving the nations that they approach, hey, we're not gonna, we won't come with you with this, unpayable IMF loan, but you have to do some things for us, like maybe give us some of your minerals, but hey, we'll come in and build your infrastructure, just stuff like that. So it's actually mutually beneficial. It's not just
Right.
like a parasitic relationship. So I mean, as far as those kind of observations on empire, like I'm somewhat familiar with it through people that I know, but his other commentary I'm not too familiar with. But I mean the people that claim that he's like, guy the guy inside Putin's mind or Putin's personal philosopher, that's utter garbage.
Right. I was going to say with Dugin, again, I'm no expert. People always ask me my thoughts on Dugin. I haven't read his stuff. I've read excerpts, and I've read some of his older stuff that seemed a little bit more esoteric, like spiritually oriented, potentially occultist, maybe Kabbalistically influenced. But I follow him on X, and his rhetoric as of recent seems much more orthodox. I don't know obviously his heart or what his personal beliefs truly are, but I do appreciate, because he has been one of the people picking up on this postmodern, modern, and pre-modern, and has been talking about orthodoxy and monarchy as like a return back to pre-modernity. And so he's been very critical of modernism, which obviously within the West, we hear very little regarding modern. Everything's a defense of modernism, right? Like Jordan Peterson's entire online work is about a defense of classical liberalism.
Yeah.
And us Orthodox would say, well, that's not the golden age.
Right. Well, I mean, as St. John of Kronstadt said, heaven is a kingdom, hell is a democracy.
Exactly. Exactly. So to wrap up this BBC hit piece, it goes into our Chad brother, Buck Johnson. Shout out to you, Buck. Hope you're doing well. And just asked him a little bit about what brought him to the church. He says at one point.
By the way, what parish does he go to?
Buck, I think, goes to Father Moses's parish.
Okay.
And I think that's probably why he was asked for the interview. They were probably there at the same time. And Buck probably has one of the larger online platforms within his parish. I'm not sure. And so there's a quote. So nearly a decade ago, another Orthodox converted priest from Texas, Father Joseph Gleason, moved from America to, what's that? Russian. I'd butcher
Borisoglebsky.
Okay. A village 4 hours drive north of Moscow with his wife and 8 children. Russia does not have homosexual marriage. It does not have civil unions. It is a place where you can homeschool your kids. And of course, I love the 1,000-year history of Orthodox Christianity here, he told a Russian video host. And then regarding Buck Johnson, the final quote was regards to what appeals to him about orthodoxy compared to instant gratification, American consumerism. He says, we're thinking of things long-term, like traditions, love for your family, love for your community, and love for your neighbors. I think that orthodoxy fits us well, and especially in Texas. And that's kind of the end of the hit piece.
Well, this is another thing. Like, one of the political commentators I love listening to is Jimmy Dore. And his message is, your neighbor is not your enemy. And even though he's kind of an atheist, having grown up in the Catholic Church, that's a message of orthodoxy. Your neighbor's not your enemy. It's the devil's our enemy, and the devil seeks to divide us.
Right.
And honestly, that's what these people seek to do. Is these so-called journalists and so-called academics, they seek to divide us. They're not bringing people together or bringing people to Christ. It's just, let's pit one group against another. These are the untouchables, these are the deplorables, and you got to stay away from them like they've got leprosy.
Right. Well, let's move now to the infamous Sister Vassa, formerly Sister Vassa.
Coffee Talk with Barbara. It's got to change her brand.
I'm going to let you anybody who's not familiar, because I would imagine a lot of the Orthodox that follow this channel, they probably heard of her, but I highly doubt many of them watched her regularly. Could you explain who former sister Vassa is, and
Yeah,
what
so
just happened in regards to her losing her status as a nun?
So she's one of the children of the late venerable priest, Archpriest George Lauren, who served the church honorably for many, many years. His parish was Holy Protection in Nyack, New York, which is just about a half hour outside the New York City. But he took over as rector from the the famous Father Seraphim Slobodskoy, the one who wrote or compiled the Law of God that is widely used as not only church school textbook, but also I use it frequently as catechism for people coming to the church because it's easy to digest. It's very, it's written at a, you don't have to be like a theologian to read it, but it's very good and very comprehensive. So Father George Lauren, he took over that parish, very, white guard, very, traditional Russian priest. And, Barbara was one of his daughters, and went over to the Lesna convent in France. And here's the thing, like she's only like a Riasafor, or was a Riasafor. She got a little haircut, but it was just a quick tantra. It wasn't like she didn't actually profess any monastic vows. So a Riasafor is actually supposed to remain in a monastery and stay in obedience to the abbot or abbess. And she's kind of been a gadfly. So where she kind of went off the rails, so a lot of people want to pretend that this is about the Ukraine war, right? And it's farthest from the truth. It's like it's the same people that like, oh, nothing happened in Palestine before October 7th.
Right.
It's the exact same mentality. Just talk about dividing people. I'd say throw those people in the garbage, because they're being dishonest. They're not interested in the truth, so they don't get to sit and talk because they're being dishonest. So what is interesting about her though is coming from such a conservative and white guard background. She was one of the very reasonable voices leading up to the reconciliation between Rokor and the Moscow Patriarchate. She was one of the most vocal advocates for reunification. So, right. Which at the time
she was an open ecumenist.
So well, now she is, but basically, if you look at her kind of like her character arc, it's basically just being a contrarian. At the time, reunification wasn't terribly popular because Metropolitan Loris had just taken over Rokor. From Metropolitan Vitali, and from Vitali previously with Metropolitan Filaret, Rokor kind of entered a period of like isolationism, and that's when we had like relations with Greek Old Calendarists and stuff like that, and our relations with like the canonical jurisdictions like Serbia and Jerusalem kind of got a little strained. It was but again, communism fell. The Russian church was free. They were rebuilding churches at an incredible rate. And to his credit, Metropolitan Loris, of blessed memory, went to Russia. He went there many times incognito, just dressed as a simple monk. He didn't want to be recognized. And he saw for himself the rebirth that was going on in Russia. And if anybody was sober-minded, it was him. He was a true monk through and through. And he lived so simply and humbly. It's like, people want to like, oh, these, bishops living in luxury. He was a true monastic. And that's one thing I can say about the bishops in our church abroad is they're true monastics. They live simple lives. They're not in luxury or anything like that. And, they're, really in tune with the spiritual life. Right. And so he had the discernment like, okay, now it's time to, start exploring the possibility of like, reunifying. And of course, Archbishop, now Metropolitan Mark, who was, formerly in charge of, Barbara, was, also a big proponent saying, hey, it's been like, at the time of the all diaspora Sabor or all diaspora council, it was like it's been like 15 years since the fall of communism. When are we going to start exploring the possibility of reunification? That sort of thing. And so, and actually, the Serbian Metropolitan Amphilochia of Montenegro, of blessed memory, he was there, and one of his memorable quotes was, if we Serbs can overcome our schism and we're hard-headed people, what excuse do you Russians have? Because here in America, there was a schism in the Serbian church with like the Patriarchal Church and then the Free Serbian Church. And so that schism was, finally overcome. And,
So
it took decades. And so she kind of, she was in Lesna, which was this conservative convent that ended up breaking away from Rokor because of the reunification. And so I guess she was edgy in that she was promoting, reconciliation with Moscow. But then ever since that, she's taken, when she went into academia, she's taken these like interesting positions. And for whatever reason, she was doing like counseling. It's one thing to have your license in counseling, but she was just offering counseling. And then the biggest thing where she got in trouble with initially was her advice to that woman with a same-sex attracted child, when she didn't advocate chastity and celibacy, but just get to know your kids' partners before they get intimate with them. It's like it's like you can't do that. And then what else did she do? As a student of Robert Taft, she was like, these 40-day prayers after childbirth, they're misogynistic. They're a holdover from, when we didn't know better. We're enlightened now. We need to get rid of these prayers for purity and after childbirth.
Really? I didn't know she said that.
Oh, it was like that. And then what was the other thing? Women. There's no ontological reason why women can't be priests.
Oh my gosh, I did hear. Yeah, I do remember that.
So it's like, so I mean, already she was censured by the synod for that, saying, "Hey, this is not in line with the faith." But again, in deference, people are like, the public condemnation. Well, in deference to her late father, they were doing everything behind the scenes. It's like, we like to take their in-house. It's just like, hey, just kind of quietly accept this correction and just don't do this.
Right.
But then she kept pushing and pushing and pushing and fight. And then one of the breaking points was when our late Metropolitan Hilarion died. And he, again, a saintly man, but he put up with so much from so many people. And she took the occasion, she could have said, "Oh, he was like a father to me," and just like left it at that. But no, she had to go crap on Father John Whiteford and Father Alexander Webster, who at the time was the dean at Holy Trinity Seminary. And they became, because of her liberal, edgy, counterculture, contrarian positions online. She had gotten into it with Father John Whiteford, and so he and Father Alexander became, her mortal enemies. And she used the occasion of the first hierarch's repose to crap on these senior clergymen. And it was just like, okay, if you disagree with them, but well, first off, her late father would have agreed with everything they said, but also, it's not the time and place. It's just not.
Right.
And it reminds me of former protodeacon Andrei Kurayev, another brainiac who went off the rails. He used to be one of the professors at the Moscow Theological Academy, and in fact, he was in Jordanville on Holy Spirit Day in 2013. I was there when he gave a wonderful homily. It's still online on the Eastern Diocesan website. Of course, it's in Russian. You got to get it translated, but it's been translated. But he just went off the rails too in Russia. He just, came up with all these stupid theological ideas, but the thing that finally sunk him was when Father Alexander Agyekin, who was the dean of the Epiphany Cathedral in Moscow, he died of COVID. He made fun of him. And that was basically it. It's like, this guy's, this poor cleric, he's leaving behind a matushka and 3 daughters, and now's the time you could mock him for having a better voice than and it's just like, just yeah, it was a very scumbag move, and so for that he was suspended and eventually laicized. He was given time to repent, even after the spiritual court, which he refused to show up for, and Patriarch Kirill gave like a stay of execution, and he didn't accept it, and so finally he's laicized. But he had he for whatever reason he's just too deep in academia and coming up with weird ideas. Same thing with Sister or Barbara Lauren. They just come up with.
And that's what Orthodox Leo has a good point. It's funny how Sister Vasa and her ilk never get called Internet Orthodox, right?
Very good point.
Is only the people that promote the tradition,
because that's their whole brand is coffee with the Sister Vasa, but and that's another thing. It's for monastic disobedience. Plenty of times she was asked, you need to get back to a monastery.
Right.
And
and regarding this article, so you've highlighted multiple conflicts that Sister Vasa has had with
all before the Ukrainian war, all before the Russian invasion started. And this all predates that.
And last week she got officially moved to simple lay status. And according to this article, and you highlight, there's more reasons than just the latest incident, but the latest incident is that the host of Coffee with Sister Vasa show and a professor of liturgical studies at the Catholic Theological Faculty of the University of Vienna in Austria, made a trip to Kiev last week, during which she scandalized the faithful by her contacts with the schismatics and persecutors of Orthodox Christians in Ukraine. She gave lectures to students of the schismatic Orthodox Church of Ukraine. Kiev Theological Academy spent time with several priests who apostatized from the canonical church and have been suspended, interviewed, and high-level government representative who is dedicated to banning the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and even attended liturgy with schismatics at a parish led by another apostate priest. And so the official disciplinary action given by ROCOR is as follows. And it reads, discussing church disciplinary matters, the archpastors reviewed the correspondence of His Grace Bishop Luke of Syracuse with Varvara Larina, formerly Nun Vasa, in which His Grace informs her of the removal of her cassock and veil for disobedience. The synod confirmed Bishop Luke's decision prohibiting the former Nun Vasa from wearing monastic clothing, thus removing her from the ranks of the monastics and using the name given to her tonsure, as well as from representing herself as a nun of the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia in her statements.
Yeah.
So that it sounds like with everything, it all came to a head once she officially
join the schismatics. She wants to make it. She wants to make it like, oh, it's because I oppose the Ukraine war. Well, plenty of people, including her former bishop, Metropolitan Mark, have spoken out against the war. And plenty of our other hierarchs have spoken out. So it's not the fact that she spoke out against the war. It's because the fact that she joined schismatics who are persecuting the canonical church in Ukraine.
Right.
The church which the majority of world Orthodox actually recognize. The only ones that recognize the fake church that she's in are Constantinople, Greece, Cyprus, and Alexandria. The rest of them, Antioch, Jerusalem, Russia, Serbia, Poland, Bulgaria,
Romania,
Czech and Slovakia, the Czechia and Slovakia, they don't recognize. The only ones sitting on the fence are Albania and
Romania.
Albania and Romania.
Yeah.
But Bulgaria, especially, that's another thing. Patriarch Bartholomew tried to interfere at the election there, and
that's what I was going to bring up.
We got a former American bishop. I mean, he was Bulgarian, but he was served in America. Bishop, now Patriarch Daniel. He's the best man for the job. Thank God. And so basically they split the pro-ecumenist vote and got the most traditional and godly minded. Again, true monastic in and out. You got the best candidate to be patriarch. So
what are your thoughts? Because where I was going to take this conversation regarding her her disobedience was movement into Constantinople. We're not going to read this article. We did a whole stream last year covering it. It's the CIA's Man in Constantinople, which obviously Elpidophoros, there's a lot of concerns with him and where the direction that he seems to be pushing the Orthodox frontima, at least within the Go Arch. But it connects with Patriarch Bartholomew, who was paid for the creation of the schismatic Orthodox Church of Ukraine as opposed to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. What are your thoughts? Because I've obviously I've had strong feelings and had been very frustrated with some of the stuff that Patriarch Bartholomew has said. Obviously, I'm just a lay Orthodox person. And I try to always couch it by God bless him. I hope maybe there's a deeper intent here that I'm not aware of, but it feels like Bartholomew is on side with like the unification with Rome. A lot of the geopolitical desire intelligence agencies.
He is. He definitely is. That's why he went to the last two papal installations, to show how much for unity is. But the thing is, the church in Ukraine, or or at least Ukraine or whatever, that's the trial ground, because the OCU, one of the first things they did, well, first off, what they have is not autocephaly, because under now the UOC, which was formerly under the Moscow Patriarchate, they've since declared independence. Moscow doesn't recognize that independence, but anyway, for practical purposes, they are independent. So the UOC had maximum autonomy ever since the breakup of the Soviet Union. What that meant was they can elect their own bishops, they could canonize their own saints, they can basically they ran their own affairs. The only thing they required from Moscow was chrism, and whenever they elected the Patriarch of Kiev to be approved by the Patriarch, because the Metropolitan of Kiev also sat on the Russian Synod. Mm-hmm. But other than those two things, they had maximum autonomy. Whereas the OCU, they can't consecrate their own bishops. They can't make their own chrism, which is a sign of an autocephalous church, but they can't even do that. They can't glorify their own saints. They're hamstrung. It's what they have. It's not autocephaly. It's something else, and that's one thing that Patriarch Daniel of Bulgaria spoke out against when he was still just a metropolitan. Well, it was like whatever the ecumenical patriarch is selling here. It's he could take back any of our autocephalies at any time if he so chooses. If we go by this model.
Well, and that brings up another question and concern amongst Orthodox, and I've heard clergy speak about this privately. Haven't heard too many speak about it publicly, but that there's some of the rhetoric coming out of Constantinople is almost as if there's a desire for like a neo-Orthodox papal structure with
with him at the top, because he's
him at the top, and just I remember the article, I think it was last year, and just his block quotes of him, it's like it sounded very Catholic ecclesiology in regards to the authority and power of Constantinople.
No, he was educated at the Pontifical Institute. But at the same time, though, I mean, getting back to my point that I kind of sabotaged myself there with that story. But what the OCU did, they went on the new calendar. They said, "Hey, we don't need this old calendar. We're going to go on the new calendar with everyone else." Well, who else is on the new calendar? The Ukrainian Catholics. And now, because of the war and patriotism / nationalism, they're all getting together for common memorial services.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's just forget theology. We're all getting together because we're all Ukrainian, and it's just going to be eventually just kind of like a de facto, one church there, and just the Greek Catholics melding into the schismatic OCU,
right.
And
and that's where the quote that came out after Pope Leo was elected Pope. A week later, he puts out a comment that almost sounds like he wants to diminish the role of the papacy so that the Catholic Church can unite with all Christians. I mean, that the quote was something paraphrasing, but I remember the end was to unite with all Christians. And it sounds like this is the perfect pretext for the Catholics bend the knee here on a few issues, the Orthodox compromise here on a few issues, and then the powers that be are setting things up for what's been worried about in Metropolitan Neophytos of Morphu, who's been very vocal about the worries of ecumenism, has been speaking about this exact thing.
You know what? I forgot to mention that in our pre-show thing. Did you see what just happened in Cyprus?
I'm not sure. You're talking about
Metropolitan Tikios, he was just removed.
Oh, yes, I did see that. Yes.
And his two biggest supporters, he has some bishops, but among the metropolitans was Neophytus of Morphu and Anastasius of Limassol, the two ones that won't, the two metropolitans that won't recognize the OCU and all the nonsense that
right.
That's accompanying that.
I've consumed a lot of Metropolitan Neophytos, the translated homilies and stuff, and
yeah,
I have a lot of faith in him. He seems to really have his finger on the pulse of everything that's going on in the Orthodox.
That's the thing. He's a man of prayer, and that's what happens when you're in tune with the spiritual life. You have the mind of the church. But these people, you could tell that something's off when you read these articles. It's like, these don't sound like the church fathers. This sounds like something else. This sounds like, the modern slop that comes from our everyday news rags that we don't trust anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why we have this pause. But when you read people like, Metropolitan Neophytos, it's like, okay, he's given us the truth here. And, just the fact that they move so quickly to get rid of this metropolitan.
What was the reasoning exactly?
It was some BS reasoning that because it was a nice gesture that the Pope was going to let, I think it was the head of St. Paul, come to visit, but the Pope himself wanted to come, and inevitably that would lead to concelebration with
right,
what we view as heretics. It's like it's one thing to have a good relationship because back in John Paul II, when he gave back so no one knows which of the three is the original, but they're all miracle working. So one of them came into possession of Rome, and they gave that icon of Kazan back to the Russian Church. And so, the Catholics, they did their last, praying before it, and then they handed it over to the Orthodox, and the Orthodox, so the Orthodox were present at the Catholic service, and the Catholics were present at the Orthodox service, but there was no concelebration. It was just the handing over of an icon. Mm-hmm. But, with the way things have been kind of going lately with, I can't even remember if he went to his installation, but when Bartholomew invited Benedict the 16th to Constantinople, and he was there in the service, at least vested in the little whatever thing, it was he was kind of vested, and it was just like, oh boy, and he was commemorated in the service as as when you commemorate the hierarchs. So it's like, well, there you go, the foot in the door there. And
how worried are you about people like Elpidophoros? So there was a rumor, I don't know if you've heard this, so maybe this is new, or if you have, I'm curious if you'd comment. I have some friends in Greece, and one of them is very, very pious, devout Orthodox man, and he's very clued in with kind of the conversations within Greek clergy. And he made a comment that Elpidophoros, what the clergy was talking about, what they were worried is they felt he was being groomed to become the next EP. And there's a plan of succession. However, there's so much opposition to Elpidophoros within Greece that the Greek Orthodox Church is going to have to find another candidate. That it's just not going to happen.
Well, Greece isn't under Constantinople. They have no say. They're separate. So it's basically a Turkish matter, and he's the only one with
authority that can.
He's the only one with. Well, that I'm aware of. Maybe there's another one, but the other one with Turkish citizenship, and you need to be a Turkish citizen to become ecumenical patriarch.
Right. Elpidophoros is obviously.
Yeah. Well, of course, he didn't do any favors when he just. I don't know if it was one of these national prayer gatherings when he called Trump the new Constantine. That upset a lot of the Turkish authorities, and they wanted to revoke his citizenship and imprison him. So
Well, what do you think? I mean, Elpida Foros was at the inauguration of Trump. He was at an honoring of I forget, it was the Greece or the Greek Orthodox Church or something. I saw that
it
he
was Greek Independence Day. It was Greek
Greek
Independence Day.
Independence Day. That's what it was. And so it's funny because Elpida Foros, I mean, he's marching with BLM during 2020. He was condoning the burning of major cities. He was apologizing for George Floyd, doing, lamenting and doing the thing that the culture demanded everybody do and bend the knee. And the OCA put out obviously a very sympathetic statement towards BLM as well during that period. And so, he baptized the adopted children of the gay couple in Greece, which caused a huge controversy. He's celebrated the Eucharist at pro-LGBTQ Anglican churches in New York.
Yeah, St. Bartholomew's Church. Yep.
And so it seems like he's clearly left of center and trying to push orthodoxy towards a more modern progressive mentality. But since Trump took office, he's been there multiple times, and it seems kind of like
he's a politician.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting at. That's what it seems like.
Not to anyway, even before the recent conclave, I very much enjoyed that new movie Conclave.
Oh yeah, I haven't watched it. I've seen it. It's on Netflix.
It's good. Even for me, the plot twist at the end didn't even ruin the movie. It was that good. The movie's that good. But one of the lines that Ray Fiennes' character, it kind of he tried to resign his position as the dean of the College of Cardinals, but the late Pope, didn't let him. And so he said he was told some are called to be shepherds, some are called to manage the farm. And while that's not necessarily an Orthodox perspective, you kind of see it though, because you could see the bishops who are true shepherds, and you could see the bishops who are politicians. It's easy to separate them.
Right.
And just like. What was it? The Metropolitan Archbishop Iakovos. He was on the cover of Time magazine. Well, hey, this Archbishop Theophoros, he wants to get on the cover of Time magazine.
He does. You can tell. I mean, that guy.
But also look at you had mentioned like the CIA's men in the Metropolitan or Patriarch Athenagoras, but also look at the one who's still around is Father Alexander Karloutzos, and how many. He's got the presidential Medal of Freedom. He's got all this stuff like awarded by like Joe Biden. Like you can't find anyone more tied up in politics than Father Alexander. But he's old now.
While you say all that, something that came in my mind is one of the fellow PhD students in Berkeley. He was a Serbian guy. And he was getting a PhD. It was Orthodox. It was something to do with Orthodox theology. I think it was pneumatology. That was like his focus. Mm-hmm. But he was working for the West Coast Bishop of Goarch, and this was basically his job. And he had a very beautiful luxury apartment he stayed at in San Francisco. But he was one night. We went out, had a few drinks, had dinner, and he was telling me some of the events that he had been to, being the bishop's right-hand man, and was talking about all these political events in the Bay Area and how much money they've donated to the Democrats and how he's been to parties with Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi and
Gavin
Newsom, all these different people. And he was talking about, one of the things he wasn't aware when he came and took the position and came to the U.S. was how involved the Greek diocese was with the Democratic Party. And that was one of the things he was telling me. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Now, this was before I fully converted to Orthodoxy. But now that, you're bringing up the politicians and talking about the movie Conclave, it made me reevaluate and think about that again. It's like,
well, and also don't forget the archons. Their chief duty is to fundraise for the Ecumenical Patriarchate.
Right.
So if you imagine how many American dollars, rather than funding the church here in America, are actually going abroad to prop up a patriarchate that has a few thousand people in Turkey. That's it.
Right.
It's like after the Greek and Armenian genocide, there's nobody left in Turkey. Well, actually, the believers that are left in Turkey are Russians that go there, who either emigrated there, go there on vacation.
Right.
So there are Russian churches in Turkey, and this is another thing.
Do you think it's probable that Elpidophoros could become EP after Bartholomew?
Oh, I think it's very likely. I don't know who else has the criteria and plus he was the one who penned that new.
Father Gabriel? I think his internet just cut out.
No, I can. There we go. Yep.
There you go. Now you're back. I can hear you again.
Yeah. So Archbishop Elpidophoros, when he was still Metropolitan of Bursa, he penned the essay that the ecumenical patriarch is the first without equals. It doesn't mean first among equals. He's like first without equals. So if that's not a neo-papacy, I don't know what is. But it's setting himself up for unlimited power, and it's again, do we want earthly power or do we seek the heavenly kingdom? It's like what's our goal here? I mean, it just seems like another deal with the devil, just like the Council of Florence. Like, Constantinople's about to fall, so we need to turn to the West for military protection, and theology be damned. Let's get this done, and Constantinople fell anyway.
Right.
So a lot of good that did.
Alexandria, Orthodox Boomer Grandma, throws in $20. Thank you so much, Alexandria. She says, thank you, DPH and Father Gabriel. Unionofallicons.com has 20% off all icons right now. So, guys, go get your Union of All Icons. I have one right here. This Transfiguration icon, and Alexandria sent me a beautiful St. Patrick icon. So these are wonderful, wonderful icons. Support our sister. Unionofallicons.com. Go get an icon today, guys. Support her and her husband's work. And if you want, get some candles from them too. They sell candles as well. So thank you so much, Alexandria. And Andrew, Andrew, Father Gabriel, he's a member over at St. Mary of Egypt. Says, God bless you both. Thank you so much, Andrew. God bless you and your brother. Hope you guys are doing well. I imagine they're probably out and about working right now and probably tuning in while they're on a job site. But thank you so much, Andrew, for the support, brother. God bless you, and tell your brother I said hello. So thanks for the support. Over on Dono Chat, John Anon throws in 5 and says, thanks for all you do, DPH. The American Orthodox film is now complete and will be made available for screenings as interested parishes, schools, and organizations. Please share the link, AmericanOrthodoxFilm.com. There we go, and I'll share that. Yeah, John Anon has written a couple of books, John Hammond, on so that the stream I did on pilgrimage, he wrote that book.
Okay.
And so it looks like his documentary is available. So there's the link for that, guys, if you guys are interested in the American Orthodox film documentary that he put together. And I may have to take him up. He says that they're doing available screenings for interested parishes. Maybe that'd be a good men's group meeting, is watching a viewing of the American Orthodox film.
There you go. Yeah.
Thank you, John. I may reach out to you about potentially getting a screening for our men's group at our parish. So appreciate that. And
by the way, did you ever see that movie about our mountain climbers at the Serbian church here in town?
I did not.
Oh yeah, it was a local screening. It was a really good documentary. What was it called? The name escapes me, but it was
Serbian mountain climbers.
Yeah, here at St. Nicholas, they have. It's not just at St. Nicholas, but most of them
on the
St.
peak.
Nicholas. Yeah,
Yes,
beyond the peak. Yeah, beyond the peak. That's the that's the documentary. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. No, I haven't seen that.
Excellent. One. Yeah, excellent documentary. If you're looking for if you and your fans are looking for Orthodox documentaries, that's another one.
Cool. Yeah, I'll check that out. I wasn't even aware of that. Sounds something Jenny and I could watch. And then over on Streamlabs, Victor Ziegler throws in a generous $50 super chat. Thank you so much, Victor. He says, supporting the mission here, it frightens them to see people tapping into the past, for they know deep inside one is right and it's not them. The atheists live and breathe insecurity. It's an awful life, and I know it intimately, living that for a long period. Well, thank you so much, Victor. God bless you, brother. Really appreciate the support. Thanks for being here. And I'm glad it was as useful, and appreciate the support for the mission. Father Gabriel, before we finish up, I was curious if you could maybe kind of recap your thoughts and sentiments for Orthodox Christians that are trying to kind of wrap their mind around some of the subversion, some of the difficulties within the hierarchy. I've talked with a couple men. I did one-on-one. So I feel like there's a very common pattern where people who discover Orthodoxy, usually young men, kind of view it with rose-tinted glasses, and kind of often believe that their lives will get better once they become Orthodox, which unfortunately usually isn't the case. The spiritual warfare tends to ramp up. But also that we won't have any of the ecclesiological problems or disputes that they see within Protestantism or even the Catholic Church, and some of the internal disagreements. And obviously those are arising within Orthodoxy. And then they discover that, yeah, we have our own subverters and some problems and internal divisions. And they go, oh, well, you guys are just like the others. Well, no, it's different. Could you speak to any of the young people that might be listening about the attacks on Orthodoxy, the hit pieces, the growth, just everything that we talked about in context?
Absolutely. And so basically, yeah, the church is a divine institution, but it's made up of, fallen human individuals. So, I kind of like the example of, how many times have you gone for fast food and they screwed up your order, and yet you still go back for more fast food. It's an incentive thing. So you go to church and you have an unpleasant experience. Well, I'm never going back. Well, what are you there for? You're there to be coddled, or you're there to save your soul. So the thing is, yes, you'll have more joy in your life than you can ever experience, but it's not constant. You'll experience the apostle joy, but basically this world is filled with sorrow. Right. But it's how do you deal with that? And basically living the life of the church, teaches you how to deal with, all the crap that life throws at you.
Right.
Like for example, I mentioned earlier going through, all the scripture readings, but when we just kind of live the passion of our Savior for just those 3 days, hopefully we, prepare for Lent and, just the rest of Holy Week too, not just like the 3 days. But even looking at all the hymns, how they change perspective, even throughout the service of the 12 Gospels, it's like, anger, bewilderment, like, accusing Judas. And then all of a sudden it's just like, the Pilate, the Pharisees, this and that. And then finally it's like, oh, it's me. We're the ones who put Christ on the cross. It's like, we turn inward, and it's just, but it's all these emotions that we feel. But it's like when we lose somebody we love, we're flooded with a whole bunch of emotions too, because everyone is complex. Whether that person lived a good life or bad life, there's still redeeming qualities about that person. Or if that person was a good person, they still had flaws. And, everyone's a mixed bag. But, going through that, living that passion, it prepares us for taking up our cross daily, because that's what our Savior says. Come after me, let him take up his cross daily and follow me. And so that's what Orthodox Christianity is learning how to take up that cross, because whether we want to or not, life throws crosses at us all the time. It's just, we get to bear it, and it's actually for salvation. It's not just it's not just Sisyphus rolling the stone up the hill again and then going back down. There's an actual end to the suffering, and an ultimate goal, which is the kingdom of heaven. And so because Christ has already been crucified and has taken on all of humanity, as long as we unite ourselves to Christ, our lives can be redeemed. whatever suffering we have, whatever unpleasantness. And it's basically not letting what life throws at us, shake our faith, whether it's, people in the church that are just, insufferable. And I'm not just talking about like the Fordham types, but like people in your local parish, like you want to like volunteer or something like that. And you got a whole bunch of boomers that don't want to, like, this is my church. What are you doing here? My parent, I did pay for this, or, it's my job to trim the lamps. It's my job to vacuum. It's my job to do the landscaping. Some people, like young people, want to volunteer around the church and they can't, or they want to get involved in, older people or at least power hungry people that are making it difficult for them to get more involved in the church. There's always those obstacles, and that doesn't mean you give up on your faith. You either find another parish or you just wait these people out. There's no one right prescription, but the only wrong prescription is to leave the church. You're going to find imperfect people anywhere, but, just stick with it. But the thing is, the church does not, dog masculinity.
No.
The program of the church is therapy. It's therapy for the soul. And, one thing that, the world, I mean, men especially, with the world, we feel left out, discouraged, like we don't belong and we're not accepted anywhere. And our health, be it physical or mental, and our suffering is not addressed. But the church offers a program of therapy that addresses that. It heals us. It brings us closer to Christ. But as with any sort of therapy, it's not without pain. It's not without suffering. But we get transformed, and then But basically, Orthodoxy is you get out of it what you put in. Same thing with Great Lent. If you have a lazy Lent, you'll have an okay Pascha. But if you really hunker down during Lent, and and you really try to live, Pascha will be so much more meaningful. Like for somebody who has been breaking the fast all of Great Lent, and they get to the blessing of the baskets, it's like, oh, okay, here's hamburger or pizza or a sausage or whatever. Like, I was just having this the last week. But for those who have really struggled and haven't eaten meat or dairy, the first bite of sausage, oh my God, it's you can't describe that. It's like you've suffered, but you've denied yourself. But it's all for a greater good, and it's not just for not eating food, but it's to master yourself, to master self-control, to bring your body in subjection.
Right. As Technographic says, life gets more beautiful, but the struggle is indeed real and a true battle. It's not easy, but the beauty of our triune God gives us the strength to bear the fatigue. For certain, and that's I think the message is, one, don't approach the Orthodox Church as if it's not filled with infallible people that are all trying to be healed through the physician of souls. I mean, it's a hospital, as St. John Chrysostom highlights. The church is a hospital, and so it is a refuge for masculinity. That's the irony of the BBC hit piece, is nothing about that would make a young man think, oh gosh, Orthodoxy. If anything, there's going to be like, wow, really? We can work out with our priest. And
I mean, there's no prohibition against, working out, but there's no requirement to work out either.
Right.
The requirement is picking up our cross daily.
But the aesthetic of the masculinity compared to the effeminate, Protestant pastor with maybe it's a female pastor promoting LGBTQ stuff, that, the male patriarchy, the hierarchy itself, the traditions of the church, it is a place that preserves traditional masculinity. And I think that's what's so appealing for young men. And in addition to it being a pre-modern worldview, and that adopting the frontima of the church allows you to view reality through a lens that isn't tainted by all the presuppositions of the Enlightenment and all these things that are really causing problems in our society that we don't even realize. It's the water we swim in. And then it allows you transcendent meaning. And as Father Deacon, I remember I was in California after baptism with Father Deacon and a handful of Orthodox people, and there's a real somber moment where somebody was talking about all the struggle that they had in their life, and quiet, Father Deacon made a comment that that's why we're all Orthodox, is we come to struggle together, and that's how we bond, that's how we grow, and that suffering isn't something to be avoided. As I did a stream last night on New Age, the whole New Age theology is to avoid any personal suffering, because that's a negative vibration, right? Or for us Orthodox, that's something to be embraced. It's what makes us stronger, and it's what makes us more Christ-like. So I think,
and not only that, but even in the hymnography of the church. So I just did a quick search of what I had top of mind. St. Cindy of Petersburg, when her husband died suddenly, and then she took her husband's name and wore her husband's military clothes.
Yep.
Becoming a holy fool. I mean, that's obviously not for everybody. But you hear in the service, Oxenia of manly intelligence, who can declare the strength of thy soul, warmed with the fervor of the Holy Spirit, invested with his grace as with divinely woven raiment, with manly wisdom, let us endure nakedness and cold. There's so many references to that. And then even great martyr Irene of Thessaloniki, who even though we didn't do her service on a couple Sundays ago because of the Pentecostarian, I just did in the canon, he who granted peace to thee, seeing thee helping him for the sake of peace, filled thee with manly understanding and strength, O martyr, namesake of peace. Overcoming thy womanly weakness with strong fervor, O blessed martyr, thou hast steadfastly denounced those who worship falsehood. With manly mind, that is manifestly confess Christ, the God of all. Again, it's just, even the women become, quote unquote, manly in their witness, because, as I said, the weakness of the nature doesn't matter. They achieved incredible feats. So it's not just it's more of a it's the mindset that the often misquoted verse, the Protestants, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Well, this is doing superhuman things,
right.
like enduring torments and martyrdom, and living a life of wandering, but yet incredible clairvoyance.
Right.
It's
and I think, that's why, Orthodoxy is just going to be so appealing moving forward. Is it is a space where young men can, have the hope of having a family, traditional marriage, raising children, having tradition. And as you're highlighted, all the martyrs, the history, the ancestral traditional connections, it provides deeper meaning to people's lives.
Yeah.
And this idea that, you get to purify yourself through a pious and virtuous participation with Christ. This is a real phenomenon that once you go on the journey, you begin to experience it and you realize it's real. It can be scary, it can be daunting, but the spiritual life, the spiritual warfare, it's all real. But
it's real. Yeah.
It's so meaningful. And so, it's like you're offering a place for men to be part of the ultimate counterculture. I mean, I truly believe that Orthodoxy, because it's pre-modern, because of its Easternness, it is the ultimate counterculture that allows young men to rescue everything that they've lost through modernity, and yet maintain a transcendent, synergistic personal relationship with the triune God. And so
exactly, and like Buddhism, we're
countercultural, but instead of listening to punk music, you get to read hymns and prayers and actually feel like there's something happening within you that's transforming you and becoming a better person.
Right. And unlike Buddhism, where the individual is obliterated, in Orthodox Christianity, you're becoming the man or woman that God created you to be. You're created for a purpose. Everyone is an individual and irreplicable. So it's like, we each have a purpose and we're each unique, and we're not supposed to lose that uniqueness. We're supposed to, in fact, use it.
Right.
And embrace it.
And then just to clarify a comment, just for everybody, and then we'll wrap it up and hop off here, there is a misunderstanding that people are taking your what you said about abortion in regards to the political willingness to ban it and the opposition of extreme. They're taking that as you're claiming that you're okay with like first 6-week abortion or something.
Oh no, I'm not. I'm not okay with any abortion. But the thing is, by being so willing to just, kind of strong arm, because we live in a red state, and we've got one of the most strictest abortion laws.
Right. Thank God.
What happens when God forbid, the state flips blue, and because It could happen, got enough people moving in from everywhere else, and who knows if Texas will ever turn blue.
It looks like it's going to, for sure.
So again, people have to stop thinking like, oh, we're just going to, I mean, yeah, banning abortion is the moral and correct thing to do. However, when they want to go so far as to punish people and throw them in jail, and it's just like, just go that extra step.
Your point is that the extreme will create a opposition similar to what we're seeing with the anti-Semitism and the criticism of Israel.
Exactly.
And so your point is not that abortion is good in any way.
No.
It's just about a political theory about force and opposition and how you get something accomplished to change the
culture. But also if you live in a blue state like my home state of New York, that's as blue as it comes. And unfortunately, the last wretched governor, Cuomo, he was like, ugh. Even though his dad never pushed abortion, he was like just garbage. And now Kathy Hochul, she's garbage too. But the thing is, well, what do? Just throw your hands up and say, oh, I live in a blue state, nothing I can do about it? No. Work with secular humans, say, hey, at least get these extreme abortion laws down to where, I mean, right. Any abortion is tragic, but just because you live in a state where it's seemingly hopeless doesn't mean you still can't do good. So that was another. That's another
exactly, thing. And I thought your point was quite clear. I mean, it's not a supportive abortion. That's what it's kind of disheartening by me to see.
I'm glad you got to address it again.
To see people in the chat accuse you of supporting abortion when you're talking about how to shift opinion within a blue state, talking about politics. Yeah. It's really just a lack of seriousness and attention to what's actually being said. And it's just a quick way to try to say they got you.
Well, that's the thing. People want to hear what they want. They come into the conversation already like, formulating response. They hear what they want to hear, and it's just like, well, that's not what actually was said.
I know, and yeah, it's
like the Fordhamites. They're responding to something that's not been said.
Exactly. And it just shows a lack of inability to actually listen to and respond to ideas. So anyways, just wanted to clarify in case anybody in the future was watching the stream and they were following the chat and got caught up in the conversation going back and forth. That is clearly not what Father Gabriel is saying. He's talking about how to move the needle within blue states and political opposition that may arise.
Yeah, but also exactly. But don't just like with the censorship laws, don't create the conditions where your own weapon will be used against you, because that's the thing, with we see how the DOJ was weaponized, both, against Donald Trump, but now he's weaponizing it against the wrong people.
Right.
He should be going after the people that weaponized it against him in the first place, but now he's going after the wrong targets because those are the targets his donors want.
Right.
The green card people with no power.
Father Gabriel, is there anything that you want to leave the people or how they can potentially get in contact with you? I know last time you mentioned if anybody was going through divorce or struggling with some of their marriage, that they could reach out to you and have private conversations with you. Is that something that you'd still be open to if anybody was interested?
Absolutely. And of course, also, if anyone wants to learn more on, the Ukraine conflict too, because I didn't want to get too off topic today, but, even under, and I mentioned this to you, Patrick, but, leading up to the reunification between the Church abroad and the Moscow Patriarchate, we actually had, as an ambassador to Ukraine, John Herbst, who was married to a Ukrainian lady, and he was there specifically to cause trouble and to derail the reunification process. And right now, he's a senior advisor at the Atlantic Council.
Right.
So that's and one of the other people, also from Nyack, was former colonel in the U.S. intelligence, Eugene Magarovsky. He was also a huge opponent of reunification. But again, this deep state intelligence guys, and The church, again, that's
Yeah.
another thing. The church is
Evan Miller
infiltrated.
said, "Read the book Provoked" by Scott
Yes,
Morton.
Provoked. Absolutely, absolutely read that book, because John Herbst was there when the Orange Revolution happened in 2004. 2014 isn't the first time we overthrew the government of Ukraine. It was we did it 2004. So these issues go way back. Also, that new interview with Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, and I had that
interviewing Protodeacon Vadim Novinsky. Absolutely, watch that
right here. I can share that link.
Yeah. Also, his interview with Robert Amsterdam, a former American, now Canadian Jewish lawyer who's so he's not even his own.
Very interesting.
Not even his own religion, but on principle, he's representing the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. So that's another amazing interview. So read the book Provoked.
Oh, Father Moses is here. Father Moses sermons.
What I miss? Well, we
quite a bit. Well, if anybody wants to get in contact with Father Gabriel regarding private discussions, you can email me at churchoftheeternallogos@gmail.com. And then I can forward any emails to Father Gabriel so that you guys can be in contact and discuss whatever it is you need. Father Gabriel, thank you again for the time. Thanks for coming on and sharing. I think this was a really insightful and productive stream to talk about everything that's going on in the church and the cultural attacks, the subversion within the church, and all of some of these political issues.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's always been subversion within the church, and so another thing I'll say in regards to Patriarch Sergius was, the Russian Church hardly ever goes into heresy because they never went along with the Council of Florence. But Patriarch going into schism, that's like a Tuesday afternoon in Byzantium. It's like how many? If you learn church history, how many? I mean, there are many saintly patriarchs of Constantinople, but there's also many heretical patriarchs of Constantinople that we condemn in the Sunday of Orthodoxy. So it's like the church will survive. I mean,
absolutely.
There's always some sort of like culling or cleansing going on. Whether it's from like the deep state saboteurs, like I just mentioned, or like we mentioned earlier in the stream with like the Fortumites who are coming at from the opposite angle. And honestly, I think maybe the Fortumites are getting some deep state money too to divide the church, but from the opposite.
I'm sure. So
well,
I think the Rockefeller Foundation was a huge sponsor for some of the research or their department. I forget. I did a stream with Rachel Wilson. We tried to dive into some of the funding, but it was coming from the usual globalist funds, the usual players.
Yeah. Well, in that case, they're going to find what they want to find.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
but that's like go to your local Orthodox church. You're not going to find a bunch of extremists. No. You're gonna find down earth people just waiting or just working out their salvation with fear and trembling, and hopefully, loving their neighbor and not blaming their neighbor. Love your neighbors.
All right, guys. I may be back tomorrow with another stream. As I told you, I'm going to Milwaukee for Chase Haggard's wedding this weekend. So we'll be there with some Orthodox brothers and sisters, celebrate his marriage to his wife. So if I don't make a stream tomorrow, I'll be back with another stream Monday or Tuesday of next week. So either tomorrow or Monday or Tuesday. So thank you again, Father Gabriel. Thank you, everybody who supported the stream and who is here today. And I hope it was useful and insightful. And I will catch you guys in the next one. As always, until then, God bless.